Hello and welcome to CheersToFearYT, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Black Christmas, made in 1974, directed by Bob Clark and written by Roy Moore. Clark has been a director for quite some time. He has had some very high highs with movies such as A Christmas Story and of course Black Christmas, but he has also had some very low lows as he was the director for Baby Geniuses. Well, at least he didn't direct the second one.
Black Christmas takes place in a sorority house over Christmas break. All of the ladies are about to spend time with their families, but then their friend Claire mysteriously goes missing and a search party ensues. At the same time, the ladies are getting threatening phone calls from a mysterious person. They soon find out that the person behind the phone calls is much closer than they anticipated.
Once again, we will be discussing spoilers in this video, so we recommend that you take our drinking rules posted on the screen now and play them alongside while watching the movie, and then come back and watch this video once you're done. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the rules.
Well, getting straight into it, of course we have our first rule, as we'll always say the same: whenever somebody dies, you take a sip. This started our drinking game off with 7 sips.
Yeah, and it's mainly women that die in this movie, if not only. No, there's not only women, but it's mostly women.
Yeah, there's a couple men in there. This is interesting in many ways. First of all, this is the first slasher film, so we will give it a little bit of leeway, but generally most slasher films have male victims.
Yeah.
This is interesting just for the time period that it's in, which is like kind of the 60s, 70s, where there's like famous serial killers such as John Wayne Gacy and especially Ted Bundy, who kind of preyed off of basically the stereotypical woman in this film, like beautiful college-aged women.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Like, that's why the deaths in this movie are so much more terrifying because of the time period.
Yeah, definitely.
And you also mentioned that this is the first slasher movie. Mm-hmm. It's often considered, at least.
Yeah.
And it also marked the way for the final girls and scream queens in movies.
Yes.
And that's most likely because of the heavy loaded narrative of women in the cast.
Yeah.
Like we said, they're mostly women dying, and that's because it was mostly women in the movie. It happened at a sorority house, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And that leads us into the next rule nicely, which is screams, cries, and yells, and that resulted in 17 sips.
I guess this movie kind of really started the whole Scream Queen things. Like, for example, like the silent response that Jess gets when she's screaming for the other girls in the sorority house. Mm-hmm. She's screaming their names and just nobody's there. There's just complete silence. So, like, what does she think? It's chilling for the most part.
Oh, exactly.
And getting into our third rule, it's whenever you see a POV camera shot. Obviously, that means point of view. So, whenever you see it kind of in the killer's perspective, you take a sip. That equaled out to 13 sips.
Yeah. And there's a couple times where it actually isn't the killer's POV in this movie. Mm-hmm. But just, anytime it's obvious, it's pretty obvious when it is a POV shot from somebody's perspective. You can know just based on the way the camera's kind of shaky a little bit. But that's the way you can know. And I feel like this movie was a huge inspiration for Halloween in that sense.
Yeah.
Because Michael Myers has his first kill, it's POV in the movie. And that's how the whole franchise starts off. So they definitely took some inspiration from this film.
They definitely took a lot of inspiration from this movie, I feel, definitely.
Yeah. Now moving on to rule number 4, it's whenever you see the front door, which we notice 11 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's kind of important in the sense that, like, if you haven't seen the movie, it's just something that we kind of want you to allude to, like, kind of think of a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Just for the main sense that it comes back full circle a little bit. It's set up why the front door was important, like how it kept jamming.
Thank you, dear. We gotta get Mr. Reynolds to fix this door. I must have called that son of a bitch 100 times about it.
So it's not completely random the front door just like won't open. Like in a lot of typical horror movies, like they just can't open a door for some reason.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they explain it in the first part of the movie as to why they need to get it fixed or whatever. So that's why we include it as a rule.
Mm-hmm. Hey, who left the goddamn front door open?
And obviously, on to the next rule, we have one of our favorites, which is whenever drinking or alcohol is seen, you take a sip. Obviously, it happened enough to give us 14 sips, though.
Yeah.
This is a sorority house, so you would expect a lot of alcohol. There is a lot of also hidden alcohol in the house, and there was probably more, but at the same time, why are you trying to hide it? I guess it's so other people wouldn't get it, but I don't know.
I think the main reason she was hiding it was mostly the sorority house mother or whatever, if you want to call it, Mrs. Mack. She was the one hiding it, and it's probably because she didn't want to be the bad influence for the sorority girls or something. I don't know, but clearly she was an alcoholic, and
definitely
there was probably a few more alcoholics in the movie as well, with how some of the characters are acting. They were drinking quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Barb, you're drunk. Go to bed.
And another rule that happened fairly frequently is whenever there's a phone call, that happened 13 times. And this is one of those movies where, spoiler alert, again, the call is coming from inside of the house.
Yeah.
And this is actually, I'm pretty sure this was the first movie to use that.
Yes. I don't think the I think the urban legend came before, but it's like the first movie to actually use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many movies that followed suit later on, obviously. Yeah. But obviously this is such an important rule because it's so integral to the plot.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's even integral for other horror movies as they stand, because it kind of gave the other horror movies kind of a backbone to use, such as Scream and When a Stranger Calls.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now, next up is a weird rule, especially for the time period again, is whenever Jess's pregnancy is brought up, you take a sip. First of all, it's a lot more weird in the 70s to think of somebody wanting to abort a baby, yet alone having one out of wedlock for the most part. But it was mentioned 5 times in the movie, which isn't a whole lot, but just the fact that that's happening in this time period is still kind of surreal almost.
Yeah, and it really, like you said, for the time period in the 70s, it is a very unheard of kind of thing, especially in a big budget movie or whatever.
Yeah.
That they're talking about abortion, and they're pretty much pro-choice in this movie.
Yeah.
That's the commentary that comes across. Obviously, you have Peter where he's trying to really stop Jess from getting that abortion, but ultimately you side with Jess and she's getting rid of the baby, so it's kind of like a pro-choice commentary.
Yeah.
Really, without shoving it down your throats too. It doesn't get too political or anything.
It's a very realistic movie.
Yeah,
even for the 70s, which is very weird.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to rule number 8, it's whenever somebody is missing, gets brought up. And this happened 11 times.
Have you seen Claire today?
No, she went home.
No, she didn't. No one knows where she is.
Are you serious?
And of course we included this rule, like we mentioned earlier on, because of the serial killers that were going on in the 70s, like Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
There were so many missing women at that time because of him, or, as a result.
Yeah.
And it just kind of seemed to fit the movie's narrative perfectly.
Yeah, just a lot of younger women going missing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, is another rule that we decided to add is Claire's deceased body being shown on screen, which happens 7 times. This happened a little bit more than we expected.
Yeah, we kind of thought watching the movie that would only happen 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
We considered it being a rule the first watch around, but we weren't sure if it happened enough. And then on the second watch around, we realized, it actually happened 7 times, so it actually makes sense to include it.
Yeah.
And it just adds an extra layer of eeriness, knowing that the missing person that the whole town is looking for is just sitting up in the attic.
Yeah, it's literally right under their nose the entire time.
Or above it.
Yeah.
And moving on to the final rule, which we gotta remind you, this is a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
It's whenever Christmas music is played, and that happens only 6 times. But we had to add it just to give it some Christmas theme.
Yeah, you kind of forgot it was a Christmas movie through a lot of the film, to be completely honest. There's some decorations, ornaments throughout, but especially even, I don't want to compare it to the 2006 version, because that version's kind of shit. But this one is definitely not reeking of Christmas in comparison to that version, where it's oh, I'm gonna hang you with Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Or stab you with an ornament or whatever.
Yeah.
This one's a lot more subtle, I feel, for sure.
And that's the exact reason why we didn't have more Christmas rules in this game.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the only thing that really was there to remind us that it was a Christmas movie, apart from the little ornaments here and there, is the Christmas music. So that's why we went with this as the rule.
Yeah, also the fake snow on the ground.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
And that concludes all the rules that we got for this movie. With that being said, we had a total of 104 sips, which equals just about 3.5 standard 12-ounce cans, if you consider our 30 sip per can scale.
Yeah, and the drinking game was pretty well balanced and well paced, I would say. All of the rules were pretty close in how many drinks they gave us.
Yeah.
So it was like I said, it was just good, well balanced. So
Yeah. So I feel like we've been saying this a lot recently, but this is one of the first slasher movies of its generation.
Yeah, like I know we had Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even Peeping Tom to an extent.
Yeah.
They're all kind of slashers, or at least they influenced some of the slasher movies that came. So you could argue that one of those is the first slasher, but I consider this to be the first slasher.
Yeah.
Especially with the impact that it had on Halloween.
Yeah. Especially like the final girl, the POV shots, the killer kind of like having zero identity for the most part. I feel like the one thing John Carpenter kind of does differently is he takes it a little bit of a step further by giving Michael Myers almost no personality whatsoever. He's basically just a serial killer.
Yeah.
Where in this movie, for example, like he talks a little bit more, and like you hear him scream and all that.
He acts like a psycho.
Yeah, he acts like a psycho. Where in Halloween, he doesn't act like almost anything. He acts like a shell or a robot, just performing the tasks he wants to do. In this case, killing.
Yeah. Or he acts like a shape, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. One example that he probably took off of for Black Christmas was killing people in creative ways, such as like suffocation or stabbing them with like an ornament.
Yeah, like that unicorn ornament.
Yeah.
And another kill, probably maybe my favorite kill in the movie, was the one where Mrs. Mack goes up into the attic and then she gets the hook thrown into her and she's just kind of hanging off that hook. That was one of my favorite kills in the movie. So like just, the creative kills in slasher movies also came from this, I feel like. This is one of the first to do it.
Like you could even argue like Psycho didn't really have that much. It was just Norman Bates stabbing people with a knife. It was just a knife, which you can consider like a murder instrument, right?
Oh yeah.
When like comparison, you think of a hook, you think of like an ordinary object, like a glass unicorn ornament.
Yeah.
And it's like chainsaws, even like just a simple like tool for cutting down trees. You don't really think of it as like a murder instrument, right?
Yeah. Well, now you do.
Now you do
horror,
because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this movie kind of set the baseline. It's like anything can be a murder tool.
Well, exactly. And even some of the other similarities, like with Scream, like we mentioned earlier, you have Ghostface being on the phone coming in from inside the house.
Yeah.
And then there was Billy Loomis. That was the character's name in Scream. And Billy, the name Billy, could have definitely been coming from this movie. Because that was the name of the antagonist in this movie, I guess you'd call him. So another point that I wanted to touch on, and it's not something that we're going to give a Darwin Award for, but it's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
It's when they let Jess sleep in the bedroom where a murder just happened in the house. It's like, why are you letting some girl who was a part of that whole series of events, why are you letting her sleep in the bed and then you kind of just leave her there?
Yeah.
Why don't you take her down to the station and question her?
She's sleeping in a crime scene.
Exactly.
I mean, it could have been, as we said so many times, just different time period, but it just seems stupid at that point, right?
Yeah. Not only because it can mess with the crime scene, but also it just puts her in harm's way. Like, it's, who says that the killer can't come and kill her there?
Yeah, they think they got the killer and beat her. Yeah, but you can't really be sure. And obviously, like, evidence would suggest otherwise, right?
Exactly.
And I guess speaking of Jess, it's really uneasy throughout the whole movie with, I guess, her friend's disappearance, having people dying in her neighborhood, like the other little girl, I think. And all this with, like, the boyfriend getting increasingly aggressive.
Yeah.
And courting her in the basement. Like, I can kind of see, like, her, like, mental, like, breakdown. Like, her psyche just crack.
Yeah, she does a good job of portraying those emotions, and like you said, she goes through so much trauma throughout the movie, and it all seems to pile on really quickly.
Yeah.
So it just shows her breakdown so perfectly, I think.
Yeah, she was in a very vulnerable state to begin with and just with all these things happening at once, like her whole friend group's just dying, and along with a pregnancy, like she is not in the right type of mind to like kind of comprehend what's going on, for sure.
Oh yeah. And another thing that I feel like they did pretty effectively in the movie, like, it's simple yet effective, is the sound effects. It almost sounds like someone's dragging a stick across like a railing or something. Yeah. It just sounds something similar to that. Like, it's simple, like I said, but it works so well and it makes you feel, I don't know, just that much more uneasy.
Yeah, it's a dreadful feeling, but it's so cheap when you just think about it.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. And I guess speaking of more effective things in the movie, even just the phone calls, like, they were super unnerving themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Just the constant shouting followed up by, like, the very end part where he's just like, I'm gonna kill you.
I'll stick my tongue up your pretty pussy. You fucking creep.
I'm going to kill you.
And then just hangs up. Like, it's just so unsettling.
Exactly. And he has this voice on, like, the whole call. And then the very last sentence when he says, I will kill you, it's just, he drops the shtick and he just sounds like it's his normal voice. And it's like, holy shit, that hits you hard. And it's like, wow, he's serious when he says that, you know?
So the first ever slasher movie, Canadian found, named Black Christmas. What did you think, Tucker?
I really liked it, and to be honest, I might enjoy it more than Halloween.
Okay.
That's an unpopular opinion, probably, but I don't know, it's just, it might be because I've seen Halloween so many times too, like maybe it's just kind of overplayed at this point for me, but this movie I haven't seen as much. I think I've only seen it 3 times, maybe 4, I don't know exactly, but just the unsettling tone throughout the whole movie, you feel that, and the killer, I like, you don't really see him ever, you don't know a whole lot about him, but just when you hear him over the phone, I just think it's so impactful, and I like that more than Michael Myers because of that. And just the way it was all handled, it kind of felt realistic in a sense, like it could happen to anybody type of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But the one thing that I do wish that we would have seen from this is just a little bit more detail from the kills. But that's a very small nitpick that I have from it.
Yeah, and I guess we can't really ask for something that was released in 1974 to have like high quality kills like they do nowadays.
Well,
with,
exactly.
Like Michael Myers just stomping on somebody's head and it getting squished open.
Yeah, it wouldn't be anything like that.
Yeah, especially with like the film nasties of the olden days. They couldn't really have that, so
yeah.
But it would have been something that was great to have, but unfortunately, just because of the time period, and I guess the time period, like the film still aged very well. Same with Halloween.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, now let's move on to the awards ceremony, where we award one not so lucky nominee, the Darwin Award. This Darwin Award can be given to a character that made a stupid decision in the movie that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also be given to a character that is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Peter, for breaking a window to get to his girlfriend and advancing on her even though she is giving clear signs that she will likely attack him.
The only other nominee that we have is Sergeant Nash for being gullible in ways such as not knowing what fellatio is, nor taking the phone call seriously.
And the winner is Peter. We have to give it to Peter even though you could really make a good case for Sergeant Nash as well. What tipped Peter over the edge was how he constantly lashed out at Jess and knew that she was on edge from her friend's disappearance to the whole missing fiasco. And he solidified his spot as the winner when he broke a window to get closer to his girlfriend, who was backing away from him with a weapon.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Black Christmas. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments what you think the first movie that started the slasher genre was.
Just another reminder that you should go check out our nomination video for Horror Tuber of the Month. Go check out the 4 channels and decide who you think should be Horror Tuber of the Month for December. And also make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next week's episode where we are going to be making a drinking game for Krampus. If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying cheers to fears.